You remind me of the Babe. Here's your look at the new McFarlane toys, Jim Henson's Labyrinth. This is Dance Magic Jareth. McFarlane Toys has done it again, releasing another Jareth the Goblin King from one of my all-time favorite films, Jim Henson's Labyrinth. Jareth comes included with his display stand, his scepter, and one of his goblins. This is a new release from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. I found this at my local comic book store. FYI. If you guys are interested in how tall Jareth the Goblin King stands, let me be more than happy to oblige with providing you guys necessary details, such as the figure stands almost 7.5 inches in height. He technically could stand 7.5 inches in height if you put the legs closer together. He'll be a little taller. Switching that over, though, to centimeters, looking at the figure standing 18.8 centimeters in height. Dance Magic Jareth will come with the following accessories. He'll come with this circular display stand done all in black plastic, short of for the fact it's got Jim Henson's Labyrinth featured down below. He's got one singular peg, and he has peg holes on the undersides of his feet. The stand itself is a little bit more simplified to what we had gotten before. I think the other Jareth the Goblin King we had gotten was from the ball, and it was part of the color tops, which seems to be something that McFarlane Toys has basically thrown at the wayside. I don't think they're really doing color tops stuff anymore. It was an idea that was good on paper, but with its kind of mixing and matching, I should say, of articulation, it was really hard to kind of pinpoint whether these things wanted to be statues or whether they wanted to be figures. I think McFarlane Toys is now starting to kind of see there's a market for very highly detailed posable figures. So that's probably why we're getting something like this and why we're getting something like this. Also coming included with the figure, he comes with his scepter, which I could believe has been done in all black plastic, and a painted silver head, which as you can see has wrapped itself like vines around the crystal ball on the end. It's a nice representation of the scepter that he has in the film. It's a little more difficult to get it into his hands, like probably because of the fact that his sleeves really drape over top of his gloves. It's a little hard to kind of get the scepter in there, but I'll show you that in a second. Remind me. Please remind me. I'll put that over there. And then the other thing he comes included with is one of his hundreds of goblins. This would really be just a goblin that's kind of in the background while he's doing Dance Magic Dance, one of my favorite songs from Labyrinth. I think it's the name of the song, Dance Magic Dance. It is definitely one of my favorite songs from the musical. If you could probably, I guess you could call Labyrinth more a musical fantasy film. It definitely has more music to it than, say, the likes of Neverending Story, which happens to be one of my all-time favorite movies. The goblin itself looks quite exquisite, kind of looking like something from the Dark Crystal, which was also something that Jim Henson done. I'm sure there's some nods to each film back and forth. Very much looks kind of like a vulture, and also kind of looks a little bit like a critter, a crate. That's a really neat little representation of the goblin from the film. Again, it's one of those things where you could just see it. It's one of the many hundreds in the background there. I'd love to see if they could have actually given us more of these. Or maybe this is just a little tasting, a sampling for the fact that if they continue to do more Labyrinth figures, a smart idea would be that McFarlane Toys would give us a different goblin with every single figure. So eventually, if you got all of them, you would have, let's say 10 to 15 goblins. Now, I'm kind of being rather presumptuous that we're going to be getting a lot more Labyrinth figures, but I certainly hope that's the case. So we'll put the goblin over there to the side. I know I was going to talk about the scepter. We'll probably talk about that right now, because I know if I don't, I'll forget about it. Jareth does have two hands. Obviously, he's got two hands, but one hand is a little bit more relaxed. So it kind of alienates that being the hand that you want to use for holding the scepter. Instead, you'll put the scepter into his hand here, but as you can see, it's a little harder to kind of get it around his longer sleeves. these frilled sleeves sort of does cause a little bit of a confliction when it comes to trying to get the scepter into his hand. You're a lot of times fighting to get the scepter in there, and you can display him with that. I think a couple of times in the movie, actually, he has it right to the very edge of his hand as he's kind of pointing out, telling the goblins that they should dance along with him. I'm more than willing to think that they should be listening to the commands and instructions of their ruler, Jareth. So really, again, neat. I'm probably going to just display it like this, probably a little bit more, I don't know. There we go. Wild, I guess. I could probably pose the legs out a little bit more too, but yeah, that's probably going to be how I'm going to display it. I like the scepter kind of sticking as far to the edge as I possibly can get it, and we'll kind of pose the figure from like the waist down accordingly to see if I can kind of get everything to balance. Speaking of balancing, something else I wanted to talk about before I forgot. The figure itself, let's just get this scepter out of his hand first. It's this end piece right here. Wiggle that out of his hand. There we go. Almost there. Almost there. Right there we go. All right. Whew. Speaking about the figure and talking about his balancing, the figure very much has Bowie's proportions, very, very skinny legs. Luckily, they didn't do too much work adding some additional, exaggeration to his pants, something of which that was a long time a joke after the fact. But it's a nice representation of David Bowie as Jareth the Goblin King. One thing I will say, though, is that his feet, like in the film, he's got very, very small feet. And they are fairly posable, actually. These things are sitting on ball joints, my friends. But the thing about it, though, is that they are a little on the loose side. So I would say that probably using a display stand would be your best job, the best thing you could do. He does have one peg hole. I know I said he technically had two, but he really does only have one peg hole. I did notice, though, when I got this guy out of the packaging, I don't know if you can see it. Oh, yeah, you can see it. It's right there. See how the peg doesn't look like it sits far enough in. And I didn't want to break it, so I've kind of resisted the urge to want to force that further in. This one foot doesn't have that problem. This foot right here, I can't get it far enough into the socket section. And it's fighting with me to the point where I'm telling myself, okay, just leave it alone, because I know you're going to keep looking at it, and it's going to drive you crazy, and then you're going to force it, and then you're going to break it. And I certainly do not want that. I don't know if that's across the board. I don't know if everybody has had the same issue with that one peg, being that such a noticeable stem of the ball joint sticking out. But it does cause for a little bit more of a unstable footing when it comes to this particular figure. Again, that may not be across the board. That may only be my specific figure. If it is, lucky for me. Having a look at his face portrait, I really like the head sculpt here. I actually quite liked the color top version of Jareth as well, which unfortunately, as it stands right now, my memory as it being, I can't seem to remember where I put the Jareth. I had packed him away with the intent I was going to bring him out later and put him on display. Not sure where I put him since, though. But that one was of the more ballroom outfit that he has, complete with that mask. I'm glad that they actually went with something that we've wanted for a very long time, and that was Jareth from that scene. You remind me of the Babe. Like in that part of the film, he's got, of course, the frilled white shirt, the very tight, not so much as tight as his pants, but very tight vest, and then almost what seems to be painted on pants of David Bowie. I don't know, I guess that is the wardrobe department that decided to make those as tight as they were. I don't even know if they added, drawing not a lot of attention, hopefully, to it. I don't know if they added extra pieces, enhancements to his pant area, but it was certainly something that many people joked about after the fact. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that in this review. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this figure turned out. Things like wrinkles and seams and stitches are all represented there on the back of his vest. His shirt isn't completely white, and I think I'm happier that it isn't completely white. There's a little bit of darker colors added in there, a little bit of darker washes, and I think it helps just to mute the figure a little bit. Because in real world, even though he would have had a very bright white shirt, or it was like off-white, in the movie. If you had given it a stark white in the figure, I think it would have looked artificial. Giving these extra little bit of washes to it certainly helps to make it look a little bit more realistic, I find at least. I'm generally, like I said though, pretty happy with the head portrait. The only one that we're really, well, there's several different looks he has in the film. The other one I would love to see them do is give him the really long cloak, that robe that he has at the beginning of the movie with the very long cape when he's first enticing Sarah to his labyrinth. I know we have gotten ourselves like occult classics from NECA. They had handled that for a short period of time. And I think actually they did give us Dance Magic Dance David Bowie too. But again, those cult classic figures, some of them can get pretty expensive, I have to admit. And I will say though that I think that this is a marginally better looking sculpt. It certainly enhances the fact that this one does have a little bit more posability to it than that previous NECA one would have had. Again, the hard part of picking up some of those older figures is that they get so expensive in the aftermarket. I never did get a chance to get the original Cult Classics rendition of Dance Magic Dance David Bowie here with this particular outfit. But I definitely would be inclined, I guess, if I'm able to find it, most definitely pick that one up. Overall, the hair sculpt looks as it does, kind of looks like very much like an owl feathers, which is exactly really what I guess it should have looked like. Of course, he takes the form as an owl and reappears, emerges himself as, you know, Jareth the Goblin King. So it's nice that his hair is kind of a continuation of the kind of feathers that you would expect to see on an owl. The paint on him is quite good, actually. If you look at his lips, for example, one top lip looks slightly darker than the bottom lip. I think it does look quite a bit like him, right down to the fact that they put the reflection on the eyes to give it a little bit of life. Very, very nice job done there. Yeah, overall, I'm not many faults with this particular figure, other than things like potentially loose limbs. I kind of already feel like it's going to start happening here with the lower legs, and things like the feet, which we've already discussed, could be something that could be problematic down the road. Having a look at this guy's posability though, his head rotates all the way around. It hinges up and down, and it also rocks back and forth. The arms rotate all the way around. They hinge also outward. They bend at the elbow. Now, unfortunately, he does still have that ugly ratcheted joint that McFarlane Toys seems to be throwing in all their figures. It's hidden a little bit more here because the sleeve is so poofy. It's kind of more recessed back there, but it's still something that, unfortunately, it does feel in this case like there is a ratcheted joint, unlike some of the Stranger Things figures, for example, of Walking Dead, which I just didn't feel like those joints served the purpose that they had intended them to be. They were just as loose as if they didn't use this type of joint. But I do feel like when you move the figure's arm, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it does actually have points where it starts and stops as it's hitting those little ledges for that hinge joint on the inside. Hands rotate all the way around. Like I said, a little harder to kind of get in there, but these are softer plastic. Not that you would really be doing much with this hand. Really, most of your focus would be likely on this side here. His waist does have a waist swivel. It's just really tight on this particular figure. His legs split out in that older style of articulation. I noticed that the Chief Hopper that I had to look at for the recent wave of Stranger Things seemed to utilize ball joints. I guess for this case, maybe because the pants have to look finished, that's why they didn't end up using it. They certainly wanted to avoid the idea of using the figure diaper, which a lot of times, the NECA figures are known for, where they cover over these seams and they cover over the sockets of the ball joints. But resulting of that, it does end up looking like a big diaper on the bottom of his torso. Luckily, Jareth doesn't have that. It looks pretty, I don't want to say seamless, because anybody clearly looking at it will know it's not seamless, but at least it makes it look a little bit more finished, like a sculpt of a statue, and rather not a figure that has obvious legs that aren't part of the lower waist. This looks pretty clean, smooth transitions all the way down. The legs do move forward to about there, and equally so, they can move back to about there. I don't know why you would want to post the legs like that, but there's that option if you wanted to. It does have the bend at the knee, which also allows the lower leg to rotate back and forth. He doesn't seem to have a swivel in his boot. I thought there might have been a cut swivel, but it seems like the swivel is only happening right here at the knee. And last but certainly not least, he's got articulation in the foot. Rotates all the way around, hinges up and down, and also rocks back and forth. There is Jareth, the Goblin King. A stellar looking figure from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. I think this one, if I could only find where I put the other Jareth, I think could still work well with the Color Tops version. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they are the same height. They are the same sort of proportions, and I feel like that one did have a fair bit of articulation for the fact that it was branded under the Color Tops name. This one also benefits from the fact it has the different display stand, and it does benefit from the fact it also has a goblin. I would have been thrilled if the fact that they could have added some additional goblins, but you never know. Maybe McFarlane Toys has some things up his rather roughly looking sleeve for future Labyrinth figures. David Bowie has so many various different costume changes in the movie Labyrinth, but I think the one that really I attach to the most when I think of the character is the outfit he wears here in the song Magic Dance. The thing about this interesting figure is that with the way that the hands were sculpted, it's somewhat ironic, the fact that he can only really hold the scepter, which sort of doubles as he's singing Magic Dance as a microphone. But he actually uses it on the opposite hand. It's not the hand that we're looking at right here. It's funny that McFarlane Toys would have only sculpted the hand on the opposite side as the one that really is to hold the scepter. It really should have been the other way around. A small, of course, little nitpick, but again, really one of my most favorite movies. The very thought that we're getting ourselves new Labyrinth figures just has me really, really excited. Now, what's neat about this one is not only the fact that he is posable, and he does fairly look like David Bowie, but he also gets himself a goblin. Maybe we will get ourselves some future releases, because I can't help but just think, and McFarlane Toys has already given us 2 versions of Jareth. I'm sure the reasoning for that is that they've also got planned a larger figure release for the movie property. I can't imagine we were just simply going to be getting Jareths. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for the idea of getting new Jareths in his various different costume looks, but I'd also like to get some of the other characters that inhabit the world of Labyrinth. At the very least, if we're going to be getting ourselves a Jareth, please, oh please, let's also get ourselves a Sarah. I hope that, hopefully Jennifer Connelly has licensed or allowed her license for her likeness to be used, that we'll also be getting ourselves a Sarah. It feels so incomplete getting a Jareth and not actually having a Sarah either. Either way, though, if you guys manage to pick up this one for yourself, let me know down below what you guys think of Dance Magic Jareth. It's from the song Magic Dance, not Dance Magic Dance. Also, if you guys wanted to go back and have a look at some of my other reviews of McFarlane Toys, there's a playlist available that you guys can watch and see everything that I've reviewed, from Walking Dead to even the other Jareth the Goblin King. Feel free to get a gander at those if you have some available time. And speaking of some available time, if you have a few seconds to spare, don't worry, I'm not soliciting anything to your door. I'm not selling spoons or encyclopedias. What are you, from like 1988? No, if you guys haven't had a chance to, let's say you're new to this channel or a long-time viewer and maybe just never gone around to it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Swing on over next door to the Labyrinth and turn on that bell notification so that when future videos are coming onto this channel, you'll never miss out. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.